In a slight deviation from the regular theme of this channel, this video takes us behind the scenes of one of the most iconic children's shows of the 20th century. From its inception in 1969 to the present day, Sesame Street has educated and entertained generations of children through the exploits of its characters, a colorful cast of puppets who learn the alphabet, rudimentary mathematics, and basic social etiquette in the urban confines of the titular Sesame Street. It might surprise some viewers to learn that behind the felt skin and glassy eyes of these beloved icons of Western television lie a dark tapestry of incongruously spooky inspirations. Just as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird named their shows Shell-Clad Shinobi after master artists of the Italian Renaissance, Jim Henson, the mind behind the Sesame Street characters, drew inspiration for his program's puppets from the shadowy annals of Old World folklore. The name Sesame Street itself derives from the magic phrase "Open Sesame," a password that unlocks a treasure-filled cavern in the tale of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, one of the many stories spun by Scheherazade in the timeless Arabian classic 1001 Nights. This chilling metaphor, symbolizing the opening of a door to another world, aptly encapsulates the hidden undercurrent behind Sesame Street, where strange creatures from myth and legend emerge to shape children's imaginations. The most glaring example of this eerie influence is the character known as the Count, a black-caped, purple-skinned vampire, loosely modeled on the aristocratic Transylvanian antagonist from Bram Stoker's 1897 Gothic novel Dracula. In an interview published in the April 1984 issue of the magazine Gotcha, Henson explained that this character's all-consuming obsession with counting is not only a playful pun on his noble title, but also a nod to the numismatic mania possessed by the vampire of old Slavic tradition, which cannot leave its coffin without counting every grain of sand with which it was buried, or enter a house without untying every knot of a fishing net that has been left on one of its windowsills. Henson claimed that the character Big Bird, who serves as the moral leader of the Sesame Street gang, was inspired by the Roc, an immense bird of Middle Eastern mythology, which 14th century Persian chronicler Duru-e-Sizda described as a great eagle with wings to block out the sun, and burnished feathers that gleam like the purest gold. Elmo, one of Sesame Street's most endearing puppets, famed for his distinct high-pitched falsetto and fiery red fur, was named after St. Elmo's fire, a mysterious phantom light frequently reported during the Age of Sail, which mariners observed glowing on the masts and rigging of their ships during thunderstorms. The name Grover, which Henson bestowed on his blue-haired puppet, is an inverse spelling of Revorg, a legendary silver-haired wild man said to haunt the Gemenk forest of southwest Hungary, perceived as a benevolent guardian of the woods. In the very first season of Sesame Street, which aired in 1969, Grover was nicknamed the Hairy One, a literal translation of the Hungarian appellative for this mysterious sylvan denizen. Popular legend has it that the inseparable Ernie and Bert are an homage to a pair of supporting characters from Frank Capra's 1946 Christmas film It's a Wonderful Life, with whom they share their names. In fact, Henson based this disparate duo on 17th century Neapolitan twins Ernesto and Lambertus Inganare, notorious alchemists said to be members of the secret Rosicrucian fraternity, who were rumored to have crafted the coveted Philosopher's Stone just prior to their execution for sorcery in 1621. The character Snuffleupagus was inspired by the woolly mammoth, relict populations of which were rumored to survive in Arctic Siberia into the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And the Cookie Monster, a gruff-voiced, googly-eyed glutton with an insatiable appetite for chocolate chip cookies, is loosely based on the 17th century Golem of West London, which legend we covered in a previous piece. Of all the eerie inspirations for the Sesame Street characters, none is more disturbing or obscure than the true story behind Oscar the Grouch, a cantankerous green-haired monster who lives in a garbage can. According to Henson, this grumpy puppet owes its existence to Prince Oscar von Groschenbach, a 16th century German noble who vanished in 1526 under very mysterious circumstances. The prince was the hereditary ruler of the Groschenbach Palatinate, a substate of the Holy Roman Empire, which lay near the head of the Danube River at the western edge of the Black Forest. The last surviving heir to a cadet branch of the House of Habsburg, Rauschenbach was plagued by a host of genetic disorders resultant of remote inbreeding, the most prominent being a peculiar mental malady, which earned him the sobriquet Oscar the Mad. Rauschenbach's illness manifested in a compulsion to accumulate curiosities, trinkets, and other items for which he had little use. According to French historian Poisson d'Avril, in his 1989 book, Hoarders: A Horrible History, this habit took root on the prince's 20th birthday, when a cousin presented him with a gilt silver nef, an ornate table centerpiece shaped like a sailing ship. The young noble was so entranced by the gift that he tasked his steward with traveling to distant cities to acquire similar pieces of artwork, enough to grace all the tables in his manor. What began as a harmless endeavor to embellish his surroundings quickly degenerated into an obsessive drive to accrue material possessions. The object of the prince's fascination constantly shifted, graduating from nefs to candlesticks to suits of armor. By the end of the decade, the Rauschenbach Manor House was said to be a domestic labyrinth bursting with furniture, musical instruments, stacks of books, and unhung tapestries. Sometime in his middle age, the prince's eccentricities took a dark turn. Impoverished as a result of his extravagant spending, and no longer able to feed his infatuation, he fell into a deep despondency. He would lock himself in his bedchamber for weeks at a time, refusing to allow his servants to empty his chamber pots or take away the platters and pitchers by which they served him food and drink. In no time, his chamber was crawling with vermin, and emitted an odor so putrid that the household staff were forced to take up residence in the estate's outbuildings, leaving the prince the sole occupant of the manor. Apparently pleased with the solitude the situation afforded him, the prince began requesting that his servants tend him less frequently, and supply him with entire barrels of pickled herring, dried apples, or salt pork that would negate the necessity of their daily visits. For a time, his staff contented themselves with checking in on him every Sunday, performing their duties with grim obedience as their master's health deteriorated, and his ancestral home fell into squalor and disrepair. The climax of this grisly tragedy is an event shrouded in mystery. According to the most popular version of this chilling legend, on Sunday, April 1st, 1526, incidentally 500 years ago to this very day, one of the prince's retainers entered the Rauschenbach Manor on his customary inquiry after his master's health. Upon entering the decaying house, the servant was struck by an uncanny sense of dread that made his hair stand on end, a sensation too powerful to attribute to the gloomy surroundings or the rank stench that now permeated the residence. As he picked his way through the morass of scattered clutter to the prince's bedchambers, this formless apprehension consolidated into a definite sense that something unspeakable had taken place in the Rauschenbach Manor. The valet knocked on his master's door, but no answer was forthcoming. When subsequent announcements failed to elicit a response, the servant mastered his trepidation, unlocked the bolt, and turned the latch. Nothing could have prepared him for what he found inside. The bedroom was a chamber of horrors, a veritable menagerie of vermin. The walls were carpeted with flies, glistening metallic green in the dim light that seeped through the grease-stained windows. Maggots spilled from overflowing chamber pots. Rats scurried between piles of rubbish, gorging themselves on remnants of discarded food that lay strewn about the wooden floor, now soggy with rot. But it wasn't the vermin that made the valet's blood run cold. Oscar von Rauschenbach was nowhere to be seen. The four-poster bed on which he whiled away his days had plainly been slept in, the pillow bearing a dark, greasy stain where the prince's head had lain. His clothing lay strewn about, and his boots lay where he had cast them off. But of the prince himself, the horrified retainer could find no sign. The valet summoned the rest of the household staff, who feverishly cleared away the clutter in the prince's bedchamber, searching for any clue as to the whereabouts of their missing master. The room was stripped bare, its reeking contents examined piece by piece, but no trace of the lord of the manor could be found. It was as if Oscar von Rauschenbach had been swallowed by the very refuse in which he had chosen to live. When the search proved fruitless, and the household staff despaired that their master's disappearance would remain a mystery forever, one intrepid servant discovered a single tantalizing clue hidden beneath the bed, a message scrawled into the grime that coated the rotting floorboards. Curiously, the inscription bore only 2 words.